Hello and welcome to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab,
where we engage with thinkers from around the world to explore how leaders of today can learn from leaders of tomorrow.
You're back with your hosts. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Jens.
Today we'll be discussing the topic of developing confidence in young thinkers. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, Joshua. How are you doing?
Jens, good to be back and looking forward to the recording and the topic that we've got lined up today. How are you keeping?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's an exciting topic because I was young someday, and it's always fun when you're a little older, and like little older is 40 for me. So exploring things from a perspective of, hey, I'm now 25 years in my career, and how did I do that? How did I develop confidence? So it's quite interesting because you have learned it yourself, and then you have supported, at least in my case, I have supported quite a bit of people doing that. So looking forward as well into the topic.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting kickoff there, Jens. And I think maybe sometimes when we go about doing things is that we don't necessarily make the time, and we've discussed it in different settings, we don't make the time to reflect on those things. And it's maybe only sometime later that we think, hey, what did I do 2, 5, 10 years ago inside of that space that actually made me successful, and how did I go about doing that? So in simple terms, deconstructing your successes and deconstructing your learnings.
Yeah, 100%. For me, it's important to really understand, why do you need confidence, and what is it about? Because some people might think it's like, hey, I don't care about if I'm confident or not. But if you look at it from a business perspective, for me, it's really one of the main success factors for a person is, if you're self-confident, you will be more successful in life, in any part of life, not just business. What do you think?
Yeah, so where I started my thinking for this was just around differentiating confidence to arrogance. And I think sometimes, especially, young thinkers might be listening to this, and even maybe some experienced thinkers as well, maybe listening to this and saying, hey, they're talking about confidence. Isn't confidence arrogance? If you're a young thinker and you go into a boardroom and you are self-confident, a lot of people might confuse that with being arrogant. And again, as a young thinker, you need to be conscious about how you show up with your self-confidence, but you can also just show confidence in the way that you do things. And I think that that's crucially important when you think, or you're given a responsibility as a young thinker inside of an organization, or just inside of a startup team that you're working with. How do you go about instilling your confidence into the way that you operate and things like that?
Yeah, and there's always the tricky thing with confidence, as well from a perceived arrogance perspective. Some people might perceive it to be arrogant. And I just got feedback the other day from 10 years ago where a person was saying, hey, you have been crazy arrogant. But I thought I'm just confident. I'm just myself. And so the perceived arrogance was something that was hurting me from that person, at least, giving me that feedback. But it's for me, it's like this confidence part is also something you learn over time. So what is the border of being confident and being arrogant? For me, it's always about, if you are truly yourself and you're always like this, people get used to that. And then it's not arrogant. If you always in a specific way, then it's a little bit more prophilic. Do you say prophilic in English? Yeah, I think so. Then that's just how you are, and that's maybe not something everyone likes. But if you're constantly like this, people get used to that. If you always swing into one or the other direction, then it's kind of, hey, you're showing up in a boardroom differently than you're showing up in a different other management meeting setting. So then you might be arrogant, or the words you're using, the way how you do say things.
Yeah, and I'm just going to carry on sort of with what you left off the end around being conscious about the way that you operate inside different spaces. And I think that that is a big part of understanding your own self-confidence, but also doing things with confidence. And there's a complete difference between doing things with arrogance and doing things with confidence. If you are arrogant, for example, you may engage in a situation and you may not listen to the feedback that you're receiving, or you may not listen to other points of view. Meanwhile, if you're confident, you confidently display or share what you are thinking. And then just as in your confidence, you realize that, hey, I need to listen and understand the feedback and understand the differing points of view or diversity of thought inside of the setting that you're in. And that is a massive step. And I think something that young thinkers need to really think consciously about is there's a stark difference between confidence and arrogance. But just because you do something with confidence doesn't mean that you can't listen and receive the feedback or the diversity of thought inside of this space.
Agree, 100%. And even more important, or not more important, to that point is it's listening, understanding the feedback, and then as well saying, hey, yes, I was wrong. Hey, yes, I did this in a different way, and I was wrong in doing it that way. I was seeing it from that angle, and I agree with your point. I was wrong. So it's this being confident as well in being open that you have failed, that you have done something wrong, and that's a superpower. If you are confident and saying yes, agree, I was wrong. You literally have a superpower which only a few people, specifically in business, have. Understanding feedback, understanding different perspectives, which comes through the listening.
Yeah, so I really like that example that you used there, Jens, about, having the confidence to own up or acknowledge when you didn't have all the answers or you didn't make the right decision. Yeah. And I think from a personal perspective, as a young thinker, one of the things that I learned very on in my career was just around having the confidence to say that I don't know. And I think sometimes, especially now thinking about this generationally, young thinkers and experienced thinkers, you put them in the same room. And an experienced thinker may ask a question of a young thinker and expect them to know the answer. And you can often make a fool of yourself as a young thinker if you try and explain something and you actually don't know the answer. But you can gain a lot of respect and you can show that you've dealt with this in confidence by simply saying, hey, Jens, I don't know the full answer to this. This is my interpretation of it. Yeah. And I think that that's something that we often don't like owning up to because we've got this stigma around failure, which is a whole different rabbit hole. And I don't think we'll go into today. But, just by saying, I don't know, you're also putting a totally different spin on that context.
Yeah. And that's so important in today's world. And then, specifically, if we look at it from a global perspective, where you have different cultures in different organizations and different cultures in different countries, saying openly, I'm wrong, I was wrong in a specific culture doesn't mean you're literally done in that culture. In other cultures, that's expected from you as a leader or as a person inside the business environment. So that's also being aware of that topics, where being open and vulnerable and authentic to yourself is a key enabler of you being successful, but being aware of the different cultures where you are operating. And that's a key learning. If you just take my experience, I lived in 4 countries. Germany is the country where I grew up, where I understand all the cultural norms in all depth. And then I moved to Russia, where you think it's the same, but it's completely different. And then going from Russia to Sweden, which was, again, not 180 turn, but quite a lot of differences. So you always need to adapt to the local circumstances and to the people who are in the room. And that's then going back to the feedback part where you said is understanding where the other person comes from, that you're open in your confidence, but as well open into understanding that, hey, they see it from such a different angle because they are having a completely cultural background, that confidence in a different context means something completely different. And that's, I think, in a global economy where we're in right now, specifically in the digital age, where literally like the two of us have completely different roots, have completely different understanding of the world, though that we're hanging out quite a lot in the last half year, or it's almost a year now. It's still a lot of things different. And then I think we have found a way in understanding each other and getting better into this. But if you meet other people from different continents, it's super important to be confident, but as well then go into details and understanding where do the people come from, what is the culture, what is the background of how do they think, what does confidence mean for a person in a different setting. And I just have experienced that myself, like working in Asia, or being a global project manager working, for example, in Japan. It's completely different world of how people interact with you if you're the kind of, in their eyes, the boss leading a project, than if you're an employee in the same setting on the same level than the others. And it's so important that in this way, confidence is shown in so many different facets that we all need to learn to do that. But in general, I think confidence is a career boost. Confidence is an opportunity that people start listening to you in a different way than you would ever be able to get across. Because if you're just sitting there and not saying anything, people will not understand where you come from. What do you think, and what you are about? If you are confident and putting yourself out there, it's the first step to be seen and the first step to be visible.
Yes, I'm going to put two words together here, and I think when people hear them, they may say, "Geez, that doesn't make any sense," and it might not, but it sort of makes sense in my head, and this is why, while you've been talking, Jens, what I was thinking about. So it's the confidence to be vulnerable, and I think inside of that space, we're really focusing in on you as the individual now, whether you're an experienced thinker or a young thinker, and what does it mean to be vulnerable, and how can you use your confidence to increase that vulnerability? And by being vulnerable, it just means that you're opening yourself up to difference of thought. And I think, Jens, you used a great example there to highlight how that can be utilized and rolled out in a business and an organization sense when you're dealing cross-culturally in this global economy that we now live in, but even hyper-focus that into your team. How does that then work between different generations? So how can young thinkers, confidence in vulnerability, what does that mean for us as young thinkers? How can we maybe open ourselves up to different views from gathering experience from experienced thinkers? And how can experienced thinkers on the other side of that be more vulnerable to engaging with younger thinkers and maybe dealing with views that they've never even thought of because they've been brought up in a different setting?
Yeah, I agree. Same from an experienced thinker, where you're supposed to know more because of your experience, because of your status, because of what you have done over the past. But it's not necessarily always the case. So being confident and being open about, hey, I don't know it, like you mentioned from a young thinker perspective, is the same vulnerability, the opportunity of vulnerability, and showing that for an experienced thinker. And that's so hard, I can tell you, in business setting where it's all about being perfect. As bigger the company gets, as more important it is to be perfect and be in tune with the party. It's, I think, a huge opportunity for all of us in humanity, I think, to dig into our confidence and being vulnerable and showing vulnerability, as hard as it is.
Yeah, so one word that I'm just going to pick up there, Jens, before we really talk about the how and how you can go about doing this, is around perfect. And when I think we think about perfect, is, we all strive to do the best work, and we strive to make things perfect. Not everyone, no, that's a generalization. But if we think about the confidence and developing confidence in young thinkers and in people more broadly, how can we rather think about that as a growth opportunity through contribution? So instead of just striving for perfectionism and striving to do everything, to the letter of how we were taught to do things, if we develop confidence and we gather different points of views, the longer term growth and the longer term opportunities that can potentially develop off that by developing confidence within your team and within your business and even within yourself far outweighs the immediate impact of doing something as perfectly as possible.
Yeah, agree. And it's so simple. in my eyes. It's always simple if you talk theory. But if we just take an innovation example, that's a bit more my world. So if you have an idea which you want to validate, imagine you're having a problem in your business and you want to find an innovative way of solving that problem. So what you do is you gather data around the problem, you understand the problem in all the depths. Maybe you don't know exactly how to solve it, but you put a couple of ideas together of how you might be solving that problem. And that's just the theory part. But then it's kind of the confidence part which steps in to say, okay, I have these assumptions, I have these ideas on how to solve that. Let's break it down and try small steps. Small steps. Then you put one thing in front of a customer, one thing in front of another person where you validate your first assumption. And then you gain confidence in the knowledge you build around how do you solve that problem. And that is either it is, hey, my assumption was right, or my assumption was wrong. And it's confidence in a way of that, hey, I'm able to solve that problem if I'm building it up over time in small steps. And I think that's for me, it's always an example from an innovation perspective of how do you build confidence in what you're doing and how do you solve a problem. And I think it's the same from a personal development. What do you think?
Yeah, you've dropped a lot of nuggets here, and you've definitely got my brain turning on this morning of recording. But I definitely think it's the same from a personal development standpoint. And again, I'll go back to something that we've discussed in a previous conversation, was around continuous learning. And I think sometimes when we think about confidence, is that it's you get taught how to be confident, but we don't actually think that your confidence as a person you also develop over time. So too does your confidence. And you can develop your confidence by putting yourself in different situations, making yourself vulnerable, making yourself open to diversity, and also learning from others inside of that space. And I think one of the things that just popped into my head now when thinking about this way that you framed that example of developing confidence in an innovation space, Jens, is around the saying that stress plus rest equals growth.
Yeah.
And if you think about what that means from a confidence perspective, you may put yourself in a situation where you use your confidence to portray different things and to share your way of thinking and to share your ideas. And then the rest element is also super important, because like we're saying, if you make yourself vulnerable, you make yourself open to feedback, you can then rest and you can evaluate that thing. And then you can sort of move that forward from an overall perspective, which then leads to the growth side of things. And I mean, you this morning you used a fascinating example of, would you receive $1 a day, or would you rather receive one pence? And then how does that graduate and compound over time? And it's just amazing if you shift your thinking slightly, what that does to your overall growth development. And it's, again, just doing small things that compound through time. And that can be taken quite literally inside of a personal development space.
Yeah. And that's, for me, it starts, again, like I always say, mindset. If we just take an example, something completely not business, because I'm always talking too much business. So I have done a long distance triathlon, which is called Ironman. And it's to your point, which is like rest and stress develops that. Doing it and finishing an Ironman, for everyone who has never heard about Ironman, it's like a triathlon where you swim, what is it, 3.8 kilometers, you bike 180 kilometers, and then you finish off with running a marathon, which is 42 point something, 195 kilometers. This is, for me, I truly believe this. It's 40% physical and 60% mental if you finish this. And the whole training aspect is, of course, getting your body ready and confident from a body perspective, but even more so, and I've seen two differences. I've had two big races with a different outcome and mental outcome. So you train your body to be ready to endure this, like in my case, 12 hours. Or 11 hours something. But the other part is you train your mind in being confident that you can do this, because you have let's say a year training program that gets you ready for that race, but it all is mental. It's so crucial to be understanding of, hey, this is the level of exhaustion I'm used to. And if you go with the mindset into the race, if we just take this simple example, go into mindset of a race where you say, this will be the hardest thing I will ever experience in my life. You go into it with a specific mindset, or you go into that race where you say, I will try to survive. Two different mindsets, two different outcomes. And I've had it. One race, I was 100% mental. I wasn't as good physically, but I was way faster than in the next race, which was a couple of years later, and the big one, which was I was physically way sharper, way more on point than before, but mentally not to the level. And I was half an hour slower. And half an hour in 11 hours is not much for some listeners maybe, but for me it was a lot. It was painful mentally. I mean, it's physically painful as well, but and that's going back to confidence. Bringing the point home is it's a mindset, and it's the mindset of if you say to yourself, I will be confident in doing this, I will be confident in exploring this, then you will be more confident than you would ever be. And that's for me always a fascinating thing with such a small thing where you say, I will be confident in what I'm doing today, even if I'm failing. You will be more confident than you ever have been. And that's it. That's why I always say it starts with the mindset to get into a completely personal development space, which helps you to be more confident. And then again, talking about the compounding you mentioned, it will compound. Today, I know if I train right, I can finish an Ironman race or something even bigger. That's no problem. I know that I can do that, and I trust myself to do that. Maybe I can't do it today because I'm not ready, but I know how to get up to the level again. And I think that's what I would like to give back as well to the people listening or watching this is start with the mindset, and look into how do you build your confidence in the things you want to develop it.
So if we use that as sort of a segue, Jens, and to sort of look to wrap up, and I love the story just around the mindset and what that means. And it's almost like going back to the topic for the discussion today was around developing confidence in young thinkers. Mm-hmm. And it's the first and foremost, it starts around with a mindset. So a mindset for people inside of the business, because business is made up of people. Although as much as we love AI and technology and things like that, people are very much at the core of the things that we do. So how can you instill a mindset in yourself to look at developing confidence in others, but then also be conscious around the culture that you're creating inside of your business? And is that a confidence building mindset that you're using? Are you bringing different generations into the room when you are taking decisions? Are you creating opportunities for young thinkers to sit in a boardroom, even if they don't maybe directly contribute, just to absorb the knowledge that's being discussed inside of that space? And I think that that's a big thing from a mindset perspective overall, because yes, in your individual mindset is important, but how does that filter out, and is it embraced more broadly inside of your business?
Yeah. And this individual mindsets then form a culture inside an organization. So as more as you do that, as more people who are coming together with different mindsets, and as well confidence levels, as more it will be visible and expressed in a group setting. And that's for me super fascinating. It's like, how do you build things with each other? And that's coming back to our reverse mentorship, and where leaders of today learn from leaders of tomorrow. If you put two different confidence levels and two different mindsets together, everyone will win. If one person is confident, the other person is not confident, if you just put them together, they will kind of enhance each other in the different skills. Because even if the person is not confident, they have amazing skill set and amazing knowledge. Every person has something special. So if you bring them together, the sum is always better than if you do things alone. And that's for me so important in today's world.
Yeah, and that's sort of a great trigger to set up the challenge that we've got for the listeners and those people watching today, Jens. And I think what you just mentioned there it's got my mind thinking about that saying of opposites attract. And what does that mean going forward in terms of how you instill and build confidence inside teams, inside individuals, and create that mindset to enable yourself, but also the business to move forward into a different level or achieve a different level of growth. So I know that when we were preparing for this episode, we said that we'd had a broad challenge that we'd like to place down. But I'm going to, in true prototyping form, I'm going to ask us to come up with a challenge on the spot, because I was really inspired by what you said around your Ironman and the mindset and the sort of small steps that you took to then achieve that growth going forward. So Jens, would you kick us off with a challenge that you've got to think or to encourage people to think differently about building confidence?
Yeah, number one is, and it doesn't really matter if you're a young thinker or an experienced thinker, set yourself something that's extremely far away from where you are today. Like for me, it was, hey, I will finish an Ironman. Whatever it is, that's really a stretch goal for yourself. And then look into how do I get there, and what is like one step I need to do, one step at a time. Take just one step every day to be able to get there, and your confidence will boost over time. And the tricky thing in today's time, everyone is into how can I do that fast. If you just think about this Ironman again, because it's a good example. If you had never run 5 kilometers, you will not finish an Ironman today. But even if you are not a runner, if you're not a swimmer, if you're not a cyclist, today, you can beat in 5 years. If you start step by step going into that. So the challenge for me is like, what is your stretch goal? Where do you want to be? And what is the first step you do today?
I love that. So I'll sort of just wrap up here, and I'm not going to try and overcomplicate it, but adding to what Jens said around your stretch goal, I would also encourage you to go into situations and to ask the question of, firstly, what is not being said and how can I use that? How can I learn from that? And the second element is, what don't I know? And I think if you combine that with a stretch goal and an openness to learning, and you are embracing, or rather having a confidence to be vulnerable, you can then unlock a significantly different way of thinking and a different space to operate around growing confidence, whether it be for yourself or for your team with inside of your business, or with inside building this mindset that Jens spoke so well about inside of your business going forward. So Jens, I've really enjoyed today's conversation. Thanks for your words of wisdom and your stories about an Ironman. We're going to have to get you back on a bicycle and in the pool and on the road soon, so that we can see your next 11-hour Ironman.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that will happen soon. I mean, being back in the pool and so on, yes, but not an Ironman for right now. Not a full one, at least. Yeah, Joshua, it was a pleasure. Looking forward to the next one. See ya.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the journey that is the Reverse Mental Lab. If anything fascinated you in the discussion that we had today, you're welcome to set up a 15-minute coffee chat with us. Our emails are in the show notes, and you can also connect with us on our website, thexyzplayground.com.